In a seismic shift that is sending shockwaves across the African continent and beyond, the economies of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger are surging forward at an unprecedented pace, defying the suffocating grip of French neocolonialism. Meanwhile, in a stunning and humiliating admission, French Prime Minister François Bayrou has confirmed that France's national debt is spiralling out of control, ballooning at a staggering rate of €5,000 per second. Yes, you read that right, €5,000 every second. Adding insult to injury, Bayrou openly admitted that France, the so-called beacon of Western civilization, is so financially crippled that it must borrow money each month just to pay pensions and civil servant salaries. Imagine that. A former colonial power, once strutting across Africa like an untouchable overlord, now reduced to borrowing to keep its own house in order. This is not just a crisis. It's a full-blown implosion of a nation eating itself alive, and it's time for Africa to take note. As if this weren't enough, Bayrou's desperate 2026 budget plan proposes slashing 2 of France's 11 public holidays, Easter Monday and May 8th, the latter commemorating the Allied victory in World War II. To boost economic activity and tackle what he calls the curse of France's crippling debt, now standing at a jaw-dropping $3.3 trillion, or 114% of GDP. This is a nation on its knees, scrambling to meet EU deficit rules that demand a reduction from 5.8% of GDP in 2024 to below 3% by 2029. Bayrou's plan, which includes freezing pensions, cutting healthcare spending by $5 billion and slashing public sector jobs, has sparked outrage across France, with the far-right National Rally and left-wing factions like France Unbowed threatening to topple his government. The French are revolting against their own leaders, and yet, astonishingly, some Francophone African leaders still cling to the delusion that France, this crumbling empire, will somehow lead them to prosperity. No, my brothers and sisters, it's time to wake up. France doesn't need Africa to save it. Africa needs to save itself, and that's exactly what Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger are doing under their fearless military leaders. Let's cut through the nonsense and expose the truth about the franc, the insidious tool France has used for decades to keep continental African nations in economic chains. Created in 1945, the franc was sold as a mechanism to stabilize the economies of France's African colonies. Stabilize? What a cruel joke. In reality, it was a meticulously crafted system to perpetuate economic dependency and exploitation. Under the CFA franc regime, member states were forced to deposit a significant portion of their foreign currency reserves, up to 50%, with the French treasury effectively handing over control of their monetary policies to Paris. French delegates sat on the boards of the central banks of CFA countries, ensuring that these nations could never pursue policies that prioritized their own people. The reserves, locked away in France, couldn't be used as collateral for credit, stifling economic growth and leaving African nations at the mercy of French economic interests. The CFA franc, pegged to the euro, allowed France to purchase raw materials from these 14 countries at dirt-cheap prices, using a currency it controlled. Gold, uranium, cocoa, coffee, you name it, France extracted Africa's wealth while leaving its people in poverty. Without the CFA franc, France's economy would have collapsed decades ago. It's no exaggeration to say that Africa's resources, funneled through this colonial currency, have been propping up France's economy for nearly 80 years. But now, the tide is turning. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger have said, enough is enough. They've seen through the facade and are breaking free, leaving France trembling in panic as its neo-colonial empire crumbles. At the forefront of this revolution is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 37-year-old military leader of Burkina Faso, whose bold, unapologetic stance against French imperialism has captured the hearts and minds of Africans across the continent and diaspora. Since seizing power in a 2022 coup, Traoré has been a relentless force, dismantling every vestige of French neocolonialism with surgical precision. This is a man who doesn't mince words, delivering scathing lectures to France that resonate like thunder across the Sahel. Traoré has made it clear, Burkina Faso will no longer be France's cash cow. In a fiery interview he declared, anything that maintains us in slavery will break those bonds. He's backed his words with action, kicking out French troops and ending their military presence in Burkina Faso. No more French bases plotting destabilization, as Traoré has accused France of doing in complicity with neighboring countries like Benin and Ivory Coast. He's gone further, suspending French media outlets like France 24 and Radio France Internationale for spreading propaganda. And he's banned Air France from resuming operations in Burkina Faso, telling them, "You don't get to come and go as you please." Traoré's vision is radical and unyielding. He's removed French as an official language, elevating local languages like Moré and Dioula to reflect Burkina Faso's cultural sovereignty. He's banned the export of gold to Western countries, announcing that Burkina Faso's gold will now be refined locally and used to back a new national currency free from the CFA franc's shackles. This move alone is a direct blow to France, which can no longer exploit Burkina Faso's mineral wealth with its devalued CFA franc. Traoré has also nationalized parts of the mining sector, requiring foreign firms to cede 15% of their operations to the state and transfer skills to Burkinabe workers. His rhetoric is a masterclass in defiance. In one speech, Traoré proclaimed, "We will defeat imperialism and neo-colonialism for a free, dignified, and sovereign Africa." He's called out France's looting of African resources, accusing them of orchestrating destabilization campaigns against Burkina Faso. When French President Emmanuel Macron tried to lecture him, Traoré didn't flinch, rejecting calls for clemency and suspending tomato concentrate exports to France. He's even taken on the cultural front, symbolically rejecting the colonial wigs worn in Burkinabe courts, a remnant of French legal traditions. This is a leader who embodies the spirit of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary hero, and he's not afraid to tell France to its face, "You need us more than we need you." France is panicking. Traoré's actions have inspired a continent-wide awakening, and posts on X reveal French desperation, with Macron reportedly saying, "We will do everything possible to save the people of Burkina Faso from Ibrahim Traoré." Save them? From what? From a leader who's delivering 18% GDP growth in 2 years, or challenging Western hegemony. France's attempts to paint Traoré as a destabilizing force are nothing but a thinly veiled plot to remove a leader who threatens their economic lifeline. But Traoré is no ordinary leader. He's a Pan-Africanist warrior, and he's not going anywhere. In Niger, military leader General Abdourahmane Chiani is leading a parallel charge to dismantle French exploitation. Since the July 2023 coup that ousted a French-aligned government, Chiani has taken bold steps to assert Niger's sovereignty. Like Traoré, he's expelled French troops, ending their military presence in a country that was once a key hub for France's anti-terrorism operations in the Sahel. Chiani has gone further, demanding that France pay reparations for decades of looting Niger's resources, particularly its uranium, which powers French nuclear plants. Chiani's rhetoric is uncompromising. In a state television interview, he declared, "Currency is a sign of sovereignty. It is no longer acceptable for our states to be France's cash cow." Niger is actively exploring abandoning the CFA franc, a move that would sever one of France's last economic lifelines to the country. The military government has also slashed its national budget by 40% to reduce dependence on foreign aid, which previously accounted for up to 60% of its funding. This is a nation taking back control, refusing to let France dictate its economic destiny. Niger's defiance has economic consequences for France. Without access to Niger's uranium, France's energy sector faces a crisis, as it relies heavily on African resources to keep its nuclear reactors running. Chiani's government has also imposed restrictions on French companies like Orano, which operates uranium mines in Niger, signaling that the days of unchecked exploitation are over. Protesters in Niamey have rallied in support of Chiani, cheering Nigerian troops outside the French embassy and demanding an end to French influence. France's closure of its consulate in Niger is a clear sign of retreat, a humiliating acknowledgement that its grip on the country is slipping. In Mali, Colonel Assimi Goïta is leading the charge to break free from France's neo-colonial yoke. Since the 2020 and 2021 coups, Goïta has systematically dismantled French influence. starting with the expulsion of French troops and the termination of military agreements with Paris. Like his counterparts in Burkina Faso and Niger, Goïta has accused France of failing to combat terrorism effectively, instead using its military presence to maintain control over Mali's resources, including gold and lithium. Goïta's government is moving toward abandoning the CFA franc, with discussions underway to create a new Sahelian currency alongside Burkina Faso and Niger. This move is critical, as Mali's economy has been hamstrung by the CFA's restrictions, which limit its ability to control monetary policy or access its own reserves. Goïta has also strengthened ties with Russia, welcoming Russian paramilitary support and economic partnerships to replace French influence. Mali's defiance has rattled France. The closure of French consulates and the suspension of Air France flights to Mali are direct results of Goïta's policies. Mali's finance minister, Al-Husseini Sanou, has emphasized that the country remains part of the West African Economic and Monetary Union, UEMOA, for now, but the push for a new currency signals a clear intent to break free. Goïta's reforms, including investments in local infrastructure and mining, are laying the groundwork for an economy that serves Malians, not French interests. Together, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger have formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a powerful bloc that's shaking the foundations of French neocolonialism. Their collective withdrawal from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, which they accuse of being a Western puppet, marks a bold step toward regional sovereignty. The AES is exploring a new monetary union, free from the CFA franc, and has imposed tariffs on goods entering their countries, signaling an end to free trade with Western-aligned neighbors. France is trembling. The loss of access to Burkina Faso's gold, Niger's uranium, and Mali's resources is a death blow to an economy already buckling under its own weight. France's 10-year bond yields have surpassed those of Cyprus, Portugal, and Spain, a clear sign that financial markets view it as a riskier investment. The EU's excessive deficit procedure against France, launched in July 2024, has only tightened the noose, forcing Paris to confront its fiscal mismanagement. Meanwhile, the AES countries are seeing economic growth. Burkina Faso's GDP reportedly grew by 18% in 2 years under Traoré's leadership, a stark contrast to France's anemic 0.8% growth projection for 2024. For decades, France has propped up corrupt African leaders to maintain its stranglehold on the continent. From Chad's Idriss Déby to Cameroon's Paul Biya, France has backed dictators who plundered their nation's wealth, while ensuring French companies like Total Energies and Bolloré reap the benefits. The CFA franc was the perfect tool for this exploitation, allowing France to control monetary policy and extract resources at will. Leaders who dared to challenge this system, like Cameroon's Félix Roland-Munier, were assassinated by French agents, a chilling reminder of France's ruthlessness. France's playbook has always been to install pliable leaders who prioritize French interests over their own people. These leaders, seduced by French aid and promises of protection, have kept their countries in poverty while France amassed wealth. But the rise of Traoré, Chiani and Goïta has exposed this sham. These military leaders are not only rejecting French influence but also inspiring other African nations to question their relationships with the West. Posts on X show growing support for their vision, with Africans across the continent hailing them as heroes of a new era. France's panic is palpable. Traoré, in particular, has become a target, with reports of French plots to destabilize Burkina Faso through proxies in Benin and Ivory Coast. Macron's claim that he wants to save Burkina Faso from Traoré is a thinly veiled threat to remove a leader who's exposing France's weaknesses. Similar threats have been made against other anti-Western leaders, from Mali's Modibo Keïta in the 1960s to Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, who was killed after pushing for a Pan-African currency. France and its Western allies have a long history of assassinations, coups and economic sanctions to silence those who challenge their dominance. But Traoré, Chiani and Goïta are not backing down. Their defiance is a beacon for other African leaders who must learn from their courage. The lesson is clear. Sovereignty comes from breaking free of neo-colonial systems like the CFA franc, prioritizing local development and building alliances with partners who respect African agency, like Russia or China. African leaders must reject the bribes and threats of the West and follow the path of these Sahel revolutionaries. The rise of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger is a clarion call for the continent. France is not your savior, it's a parasite, bleeding Africa dry while its own economy collapses under the weight of its excesses. The CFA franc is not a currency of stability, it's a chain of slavery. Traoré, Chiani and Goïta are showing the way forward, proving that Africa can thrive without France's so-called help. Their economies are growing, their people are rallying, and their vision for a sovereign, prosperous Africa is taking shape. African leaders, take heed. Stop groveling before Paris. Your people deserve better than to be pawns in France's desperate bid to save itself. Follow the example of Traoré, who's building gold refineries and national reserves, Chiani, who's demanding reparations for decades of looting, and Goïta, who's forging new partnerships to uplift Mali. The time for liberation is now. Break the chains of the CFA franc, expel the neo-colonialists, and build an Africa that serves Africans. The world is watching, and history will remember those who dared to stand tall. The meteoric rise of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger under the fearless leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, General Abdourahmane Chiani and Colonel Assimi Goïta is a thunderous rebuke to the neo-colonial order that has bled Africa dry for centuries. As France's economy teeters on the brink, its debt soaring at 5,000 euros per second, and its leaders scrambling to salvage a nation that can't even pay its pensions without borrowing, the Sahel's Alliance of Sahel States, AES, is charting a bold path to sovereignty. This is a defining moment for Africa, a clarion call for corrupt African leaders to abandon their subservience to the West, and for the West to face the consequences of its decades-long manipulation of our continent. The lessons from this revolution are crystal clear, and they demand action. Corrupt African leaders, from the palaces of Yaoundé to the corridors of N'Djamena, must heed the Sahel's example or risk being swept away by the tide of history. For too long you've sold your people's future for French aid, Western loans, and empty promises of development. The CFA franc, a colonial shackle, has enriched your coffers while impoverishing your nations, allowing France to plunder Africa's gold, uranium and cocoa at will. Leaders like Paul Biya and Idriss Déby have danced to France's tune, prioritizing foreign interests over their people's needs. The result? Stagnant economies, crumbling infrastructure, and a betrayed populace. Take note of Traoré's courage in expelling French troops, banning C-franc exports, and nationalizing Burkina Faso's gold mines. Learn from Chiani's demand for reparations for Niger's looted uranium and his slashing of foreign aid dependency. Emulate Goïta's vision in Mali, where local languages are replacing French, and new partnerships with Russia are breaking Western monopolies. Your lesson is simple: sovereignty is non-negotiable. Reject the CFA franc and create currencies that serve your people. Nationalize your resources, invest in local industries, and build economies that uplift Africans, not Western corporations. Stand firm against Western threats, coups, sanctions and assassinations, as Traoré, Chiani and Goïta have done. Your people are watching, and they demand leaders who fight for them, not puppets who bow to Paris. To the West, particularly France, your time of reckoning has arrived. For decades you've manipulated Africa through corrupt proxies, installing leaders who serve your interests while keeping our continent in chains. The CFA franc was your masterstroke, a currency that ensured Africa's wealth flow to your banks, while our nations languished in poverty. You assassinated visionaries like Félix Roland Momier and Sylvanus Olympio, orchestrated coups against Modibo Keïta, and destabilized Libya after Gaddafi dared to dream of a Pan-African currency. But the Sahel's rebellion has exposed your weakness. France's economy is collapsing, its debt a curse in Bairou's own words, and its influence in Africa is evaporating as Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger slam the door shut. The West must learn that Africa is no longer your playground. The AES's defiance, expelling your troops, rejecting your currency and forging new alliances, proves that Africa can thrive without you. Your plots to remove Traoré and others will fail as the people of the Sahel stand united behind their leaders. Your sanctions and threats only fuel our resolve. The lesson is clear. Respect Africa's sovereignty or face irrelevance. The days of extracting our resources while offering crumbs in return are over. Africa is rising, and you must either partner with us as equals or watch your influence crumble further. The Sahel revolution is a beacon for the continent. Corrupt leaders, shed your cowardice and embrace the courage of Traoré, Chiani and Goïta. Break free from the West's chains, reclaim your resources, and build nations that serve your people. To the West, abandon your neo-colonial arrogance and recognize Africa's power. The future belongs to an Africa united, sovereign, and prosperous. An Africa that will never again bow to foreign masters. Let's seize this moment and forge a continent that shines as brightly as the dreams of our ancestors.